and I'm at the edge of this tunnel, and everything in my body's like, that's dangerous. Don't go through this tunnel. But everything on the other side of me was like, no, I want to know what's on the other side. That's what life is about. Giving ourselves permission to pass through that dark tunnel. And as soon as we unwire that and we learn that we have the capacity to cross that threshold, the amount of life that opens up to us is limitless. Change your relationship with bad. We don't have to feel bad for feeling bad. And that's where forgiveness allows us to release all that.
How does someone prioritize, coming full circle from what we started with?
Pick one non-negotiable. So maybe you start with...
Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. There have been some moments on my end recently that have been a real challenge. And I think we all experience it at different times in our lives, right? Whether it's from setbacks, self-doubt, just the busyness of life, there are so many moving parts that can often result in us becoming our own worst enemy. And in these moments, it can be really difficult to prioritize the different aspects of our wellness. I know that definitely is the case for me. So that's why I'm really excited to have my good friend, Joel Primus, on the show today. Joel is a former elite runner for Team Canada whose Olympic dreams were shattered by a career-ending injury. But instead of letting it define him, he found a new path. A path that led him to founding the company Naked Underwear, from his kitchen table to it becoming a NASDAQ-listed brand. He shares a number of powerful insights in our conversation for navigating the unknown. We're not only going to hear his inspiring story, but we're also going to dive deep into his latest book, Good Boy, Bad Boy. One of the biggest insights for me was on why you don't have to feel bad about feeling bad, no matter what that negative emotion is, whether it's guilt, shame, frustration, anger, sadness, whatever it is. We'll also talk about the non-negotiable habits that he utilizes to prioritize his wellness no matter how busy he gets, and how he's building all of that into his new inspiring brand, Naked Revival. That's coming right up here on The Edge of Possible. Joel, great to have you here, man.
Thank you, brother. Good to be with you.
Yeah, it's always good having our conversations. So, hey, one thing that, to kick these things off here, one thing that really impresses me about you, and we've known each other for a decent amount of time now, really is your ability to, with all that you've got going on. I mean, you've got a young family, you've got multiple projects that you're working on that we'll definitely delve into at some stage throughout our conversation today. There's something about, like, through all of that, you've got some crazy stuff going on and still somehow you're able to prioritize your wellness. And I've seen that happen consistently over a period of time. So a lot of people struggle with this. I'm included at different times as well. So I really want to unpack what are some of those habits and rituals that you've found to be most useful if someone's struggling with this in terms of prioritizing their own health and well-being in their own busy schedule. What's maybe the number one tip that you'd have for them that would make the biggest difference?
Yeah. A lot of our habits we develop when we're young, and we actually aren't conscious that we're developing these habits. We don't realize it, right? And that is both the things that we do and the things that we see our parents and our peers and our teachers do, right? And so when I was very young, I was into athletics, and I was forced into a mental model of you train every day no matter what. Doesn't matter how you feel, doesn't matter what the weather is, doesn't matter what's on your schedule, you train. And so that's never left me. It doesn't matter where I've traveled in the world, doesn't matter if I'm on a filming expedition, hunting expedition. 2 months ago, we were filming an episode for one of our shows, and we were 5 guys on a tiny fishing boat in northern British Columbia, and I was doing pull-ups, a 20-minute, as many rounds as possible, pull-ups and push-ups in a 2 square foot area, right? And it's just such a habit that's ingrained. And what I've tried to do is, although it's a natural habit, I've tried to make it a non-negotiable to sweat once a day. And what we get today in the age of the internet, both a positive and negative, is we're just inundated with fitness influencers and people who have lots of wonderful, inspiring, and educational things to say about habits and routines. But we get too many things at once. And then we try and put it all in and we upset the apple cart. And so my view is pick one non-negotiable and build from that one non-negotiable. So for me, it's always fitness and sweat once a day. And then beyond that, it's okay, where does my skincare fit in? Where does meditation fit in? But you can't start with them all. And you have to be willing to let some of them go so that you can keep building up the wins with the one non-negotiable and not letting, well, I didn't do my red light therapy today. And then it happens all the time. It derails people. It demotivates people and they're just, well, tomorrow I'm not going to do anything. I've seen it happen, right? So it's about sticking to that one thing. Like I had a buddy who tore his rotator cuff recently. And I said to him, I know you love lifting and jujitsu and you can't do either of those things. You have to do the stationary bike every day and you have to do farmer's carries every day. Two things that you can do that won't F up your rotator anymore. And if you don't do those things, you will fall off your program. And that story doesn't have a happy ending, right? He's up 25 pounds and he's not happy about it. And he said it's caused him depression. It's affected his work, his creativity. And it's just, okay, find where you can make that entry point into that non-negotiable, no matter what the circumstances of your day-to-day life are.
There's standards in there, right? There's that non-negotiable and not flooding it with too many of those standards where it becomes unachievable, right?
Yes.
Because if that occurs, then all of a sudden you're almost setting yourself up for failure right from the beginning, right? You're setting yourself up for disappointment right from the beginning, where it was an unachievable standard that you haven't built or put in enough reps to be able to have the capacity to actually execute on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things. Like find that one thing. And so I think that's a really good way of looking at it, that if you have that one thing for whoever is listening, one non-negotiable piece, like choose what that is for you. And like, is there a way that people go about choosing that? How does someone go about prioritizing? Okay, well, I've got to choose between this or this, right? How do you go about actually making that decision when there's multiple different competing priorities?
There's a really simple answer to that question. And it's, what's the thing that makes you feel the best? Because from there, you create positive momentum. And so for my wife, for instance, it's actually her skincare routine. And then fitness falls a close second to that. But her non-negotiable is skincare. And that's because she struggled with acne and she struggled with different skin ailments. And so it's really important for her to get the win every day on her skin, because if her skin starts to feel bad, her self-esteem and all these other components of her life, they fall out of that, right? And so I think go to that one thing that makes you feel the best. And for me, it's sweating. For somebody else, it's probably meditating or going for a long walk, whatever it is, right? Is the thing that makes you feel the best, because when we feel really good about doing that thing, we can build on that, right? And I like what you said, buddy, about standards, because there's this one, I'm not sure if it's a quote, but it's a method, it's a framework where he says, like, if I was a professional, what would this look like? If I was in the NBA, what would this look like? And so we start with the win and the non-negotiable, but I'm always trying to build towards, but then what does this look like if I'm a professional? Because a professional, essentially, by definition, does something very well, right? And so when we start to put all of these things together, we treat it like I'm a professional, and these are the things that make me great at what I do, then we can take the one non-negotiable and we can build it into a framework of success for our life that has multiple things, because an athlete does multiple things. An athlete does diet, an athlete does fitness, an athlete does mental health, an athlete does not just mental health, but sort of sports psychology and all of they're studying tape. They're doing all these things to be great. You're fantastic at that. When you tackle something, you tackle it from every single foreseeable angle, right? But you can do that because you've worked the muscle of, okay, these are the components that I need to own in every single one of these functions as part of being great. And I'll just give an example of that as, well, maybe I'll use you as an example. Like you're a world-class speaker. right? Well, what are the things that make you a world-class speaker? It's not just moving your lips, right? It's having the energy to be on stage, having the energy not just to be on stage, but to travel around the world. Like you told me the ridiculous schedule that you have. Like you're speaking one morning and one afternoon in Houston or Dallas, and you're speaking the next morning in Orlando, and then that afternoon in Tampa. There's a stamina that comes with that. And so physical fitness becomes not just a function of looking good. It becomes a function of doing your job well. And that framework allows us to look at the different aspects of our life as part of achieving a goal, a professional goal.
You mentioned with earlier about the exercise, the working out, the you train no matter what mentality. Who was it that said to you, you train no matter what?
It's funny because I had an old school coach as a track athlete, like old school, where he screaming and yelling at you was love. And we've shifted so far from that in this day and age. And I understand the cultural drivers for that, and also the psychological drivers. But when I look back at it and reflect at it, and I say, when my coach would scream at you or yell at you if you missed a run one day, or you didn't push as hard on a certain rep of a workout that you were doing, he wasn't trying to make you feel less about yourself. He was saying, I see something better in you. I see more in you, and I'm going to do what I know to get that out of you. And if it's anger, which was his mode, fine. And when I was able to get into that frame that every time he just lost it on me, it was because I wasn't showing up as the best version of me. And he knew there was a better version of me in there, and he wanted to pull it out. That voice is in my head every day. Right? My
his
parents,
voice, his actual voice, is it?
Yeah. And his snort. He would snort. He couldn't say a sentence without snorting. And so I have it all in my head. But you know what? Like, he practiced what he preached. He walked every single day. He walked every single day of his life into his 90s. And he lived long, and he lived wonderfully because of a discipline to, a singular physical commitment. And so I think having a functioning, obviously mind, but a high functioning body enables us to create so many more possibilities for how we want to live and what we want to do as a foundational building block of that. Not just about looking good.
I think that's a really key part of this, is it goes so much deeper than what you just said, looking good. There is a feeling good component. There is a capacity component to being able to do other things, to live well, to execute on things that you're aiming to execute on, to really be able to function at the best we possibly can. And at the end of the day, I think about it as like it's a vessel, right? That this is what we can utilize to go after the dreams that we have, to follow through with everything that we say that we're aiming to achieve. One of the things that I think is really interesting with what you just shared as well is, okay, you've got someone yelling and screaming, and his voice is even in your head now as well. It's almost two things here of, one, the perception that you had to build within your own self of this person, even though it might not be the way that I would ideally like to receive it, I can see the intent behind it. Or maybe you did like to receive it in that way. I don't know. But
I'm not a martyr in that way.
So in that case, it was being able to see past the mode of delivery and receiving the intent as to why it was occurring in the first place. And so I think there's that, because at the end of the day, we've got to take responsibility for how we receive information, how we process that information, and how we utilize that information to then go where it is that we want to go next. And it doesn't mean that results in you allowing people to walk all over you or anything like that. There's clear boundaries that we can still have, which I'd like to talk about, sometime today as well. But we have that piece, but also you've mentioned with him and that voice being there, how important it is to also have people around you who are wanting to see you succeed.
Yeah.
Because there's a big difference between somebody tearing you to shreds because they've got their own self-limiting beliefs or patterns of behavior that are playing out, and they're pushing you down in order to make themselves feel significant or feel superior, versus someone who is, I know you're better than this. I know you're capable of so much more, and I'm gonna in this case beat it out of you almost. But finding those ways to ensure that you've got the right people around you. How have you gone about making sure that those people are around you?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm gonna start a little earlier, and hopefully I don't forget the question you asked me at the end. But there's a cultural component to this, right? This idea of equitable beginnings, and this comes down to the mentors, the father figures, the coaches. And I mean those as archetypes. I don't mean those as genders, right? I don't mean like, oh, this is just, there's a role for that in life. And it is the role of the father. And if it's the mother doing it, she's taking the role of the father and saying, there's a comfort in one aspect where we feel safe and we feel secure and we feel fed. And then there's another role, and that's the role of that pushes us and says, I'm not, just because you're my kid or just because you're my friend's kid or I coach you or whatever, that I'm not still going to push you to the best, to your best, to beyond that, because I believe in you. And I know that if you pass through this struggle, on the other side of that is everything that you could possibly want in life. And there's so many people in this world who don't get that. They don't get that person it's a gift to have someone who challenges you and pushes you in that role. And if you don't learn it young, you're either very lucky enough to have it within yourself, that you just have that self drive. But all the great, you look at Michael Jordan, his father was integral, Tiger Woods, etc. That figure as an archetype was integral to push them to excellence. Now, in many cases, that had a dark side to it, which we can maybe get to later. So it's been actually interesting because when you're young, all these beautiful people are in your life. And then as life goes on, there's sort of a natural selection. People self-select out of your life or you self-select out of theirs, or you have kids and timing and they don't. And there's this ebb and flow to who it is that's going to be there for you. And when shit really gets tough, you start to see like, okay, you're there. And that person's not actually here. And I'll give you an example. I had the good fortune of raising a lot of money with one of my companies, tens of millions of dollars. And the company was trading on the NASDAQ, and I was meeting people all over the world. And I would have these great conversations and these great elaborate dinners and talk to these people. Oh, we need to raise more money, or we're trying to achieve this. And as soon as that company went away, 99% of the people, no matter how great the dinner was, no matter how great the challenge was that we had overcome together with a specific moment in time in that company, they just disappeared. And you realize it was not you that they were connected to. It was the thing. This is actually a real thing with like pregnant women. Like women sometimes who want to have kids naturally gravitate towards pregnant women because they want to be in that orbit, right? Be in that energy, but it's not you, it's the thing. And so being able to see that forest from those trees early and only, not to say you don't associate, of course you do, not to say you're not loyal, of course you are, but to know and be able to say, who's actually really here for me? You're one of those guys for me, right? And there is nothing that holds our relationship together other than a mutual desire to know each other's hearts through all of the good and the bad, through all of it. And it's really having open eyes to that, because my friends don't have to be, or my associates don't have to be successful. They don't have to have a certain income bracket or success as entrepreneurs or artists to be in my orbit. It's my orbit is about who's there to hold my heart and whose heart I want to hold. Because at the end of the day, that matters more to me, and that will lift me higher than who can, on a fundamental level, help me through a situation, right? Or practical level, help me through a situation. So I've just had to not be so ignorant as to who that person or those people really are. And there's just been a lot of, it's just been time that's made that happen.
How do we go about being that person that is there? You know, that does show up, that has that level of integrity, that genuinely is there to support and to, you know, in the most challenging of moments. Like how, because again, with different things that are going on, and I am a big believer that majority of us have a desire to be good human beings. With that, I think one of those beautiful things that we can experience is being there in the challenging moments, is being there in the darkness. And there's a number of studies that have shown that number is decreasing of the people that folks have as confidence, as people that they can share everything with. And that, I think that's a big challenge that we're going to be coming up against in the years to come as life becomes increasingly digital. What are some of the attributes do you feel that result in somebody being somebody trustworthy in the most challenging of moments?
I mean, that's a great question, and it scares me because ChatGPT is really, really good at being there for you, right? And maybe, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation about whether or not that is really there for you, or if, you know, your Facebook friend is really there for you. But let's backtrack to something you articulated really well, and then land back in this question. You said, when we talked about being able to separate the intent of my coach's words versus the delivery of them, how they came to me. When we can do that, removing our ego out of the equation, right? We are seeing something for the good intent that it is. And this is one of those things where our sensitivities, our insecurities, all our past traumas, they come, you know, I'm as guilty as anyone of being very defensive off the hop about certain things and getting sort of not puffed up because I'm not a confrontational person, but up in arms about why somebody said something, as opposed to, or sorry, how somebody said something, not as opposed to why they said it. And this happens so much in the team environment, right? You and I run businesses. We've been a part of teams, and we know that how somebody's showing up, if their intent is aligned to the goal of the team, the goal of the project, the goal of the organization. It doesn't matter if it's tough love. It doesn't matter if you accept them, that their intent is there and their process is there. Then you can let all that other bullshit fall away. And all of a sudden you're co-creating with this group, whether it's a coach, whether it's a group, you're co-creating towards the same end, and all that other garbage is gone. And that's how excellence happens. That's how camaraderie happens. And that's how teams win, and teams or individuals who end up just constantly approaching things from their ego. That's why those things fall apart, right? And so there's a lot of power in being able to separate that. And I think, you know, maybe that's one of the ways that we do show up is we remove our ego, this identity. We're able to learn where our wounds are showing up in our reactions. And all of a sudden we don't end up fighting all those people around us who we love. We end up loving them. We end up being there unconditionally. And that's so incredibly powerful. And it's so hard to do because we are literally taught to be combative, right? We are fed takedowns and whatever on social media all day long. And so we're taught that that's what's celebrated is the reaction. And when we remove that reaction, we can see somebody for who they are, and we can really be there for them for who they are. And I'll give you an example. My wife's a doula, but the same thing in coaching work or shamanic healing work is when you completely separate yourself and are just there for somebody else, it is the best possible feeling in the world. But we don't know that. We're not familiar with that feeling. But that's the only way we can get there, is by removing ourselves out of it. Right? And you're good at that, because you always, whenever we chat, always check in first. Like a no bullshit check in. Right? And I think that's a tactic. You know, if people want, like, it's I'm not gonna unload yet. I'm gonna provide a space for somebody, and it becomes very mutual.
Then this is a really important conversation, because the ability to be able to be truly there for those around us, to be in full service in a way. And if you are, I would say there is an increased chance that someone could take advantage of that, of your good nature. And one of the things that you mentioned before is that you're not being confrontational, as an example, one of the things you mentioned earlier. So let's talk for a bit about boundaries. Has that non-confrontational nature and that desire to be there for others and be of service, has that had a downside when it comes to boundaries and maybe not having boundaries? Or have you had boundaries there and it's enabled you to withstand maybe some things that might come in? Like, how has that run out in your life so far?
That's a great question, Cam. I mean, everything has a downside. Certainly, I have put myself in situations where I'm overextended, I'm overexhausted, I'm overly stressed from not having proper boundaries. And that's a real thing. The flip side to that is, again, asking yourself, like, what is the metric of if you need to attach a metric to, is how did I show up in this situation, regardless of how somebody treated me. And if I showed up the way that I wanted to show up and somebody took advantage of that, that's not on me. Now, if somebody continues to take advantage of that, then that's definitely on me, right? And so we have to understand where, again, it's called a negative motivation, right? So you have negative liberty and you have positive liberty. I think that's Isaiah Berlin. And negative liberty means you're doing something you think is positive, but you're actually doing it from a negative motivation. The greatest example of this is insecurity. Therefore, I need to become very successful. And it's not a positive place to be motivated from. And this is where a lot of us get roped into. For instance, we sit on 15 different charity boards because we feel too insecure about our weight to do anything about it, or something like that. That's just a really general example where we're actually using it as an avoidance tactic. And for myself, it's I do catch myself, and then every single day we have a chance to reassess everything. Right? Every single day, I believe that we are born again, and we get to choose what we do with that moment. And so, if I gave 3 months or 6 months to an abusive relationship, again, define abusive. That's a large spectrum, but anything on that spectrum can be hard on us. And I can say, but this is why I let that happen. And I can lean into the positive aspects, and I can still choose to say, okay, but now is enough, and I'm not going to let this go on anymore. And so we can find the goodness even if in how we've shown up, even if it's led to a bad situation, and through being able to have self-awareness, we can nip that in the bud. But I find, going back to people, it's often not myself who catches it. It's like when I do my monthly check-in with you or one of my other friends, it's like, oh, shit, man, like that sounds like you got to actually not do that, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, Cam's right, But that doesn't mean that I was wrong for doing it. It just means I shouldn't do it again, if that makes sense. Again, these are not things that I have figured out. These are things that I'm figuring out, and we all are.
I think we're always figuring them out, aren't we? For the rest of our lives, because there's new layers. There's new layers. I remember years ago, there was right at the start, this is going back 15 years now, one of the first things that I learned in training to coach folks is what you focus on is what you get, to the exclusion of everything else, right? And that where focus goes, energy flows is the key piece, right? But that wording, the first one was what you focus on is what you get to the exclusion of everything else. And there have been and continue to be just layers and layers and layers of wisdom that come from the depth of understanding about us, something that looks on the surface to be so incredibly simple. And I remember having a conversation, and I felt like I'd gone through like 3 or 4 layers, but I'm like, oh, and now I kind of think I understand it a little bit. But it was almost like a humble feeling and an experience, because it was, I'm never going to arrive with this. There's always going to be another level to experience it at. And I remember having the conversation with, I can't remember who exactly it was now, but that it was someone that was in my initial training, some of the training that I went through. And I was sharing with them about this insight that I'd had about focus, about, this newfound understanding and realization about the power of focus. And the person said, yeah, what you focus on is what you get to the exclusion of everything else. And it was like, it was sharing back the exact wording. And I remember, I didn't say anything in the moment, but I remember thinking to myself like, oh, but do you really get it? Like, do you really, like, there's a understanding at a standard level, but then there's the layers and layers and layers of depth. And I remember a mentor of mine years ago saying, the moment you think you've arrived is the moment you're in for a very big fall. And that really stuck with me, because there can be such a humble nature to it. You can build these levels and layers of wisdom and know that you've never arrived, that there's always another level to understand something at. And it's one of the reasons I love music so much, is that it doesn't matter how good I get. Like, I've been playing piano for like 30 plus years now. And I'm still only just scratching the surface. And there's no way that I'll ever arrive on that. And there's some beauty about that, because there's always another level. There's always new growth and evolution that we can go into. And one of those areas with, as you were sharing, the ability as you're going through, okay, let's say there's a challenging situation that someone goes through, and maybe they look back at the decision that they made and think, man, I shouldn't have made that decision, or I was stupid to do that, or something along the lines of, and I know this is the case for a lot of people, and it's a key part of your one of your books, Good Boy, Bad Boy, about becoming our own worst enemy, right? Of like, how do we stop doing that when we can be our own worst critic, and we spend more time with ourselves than anybody else. And so we see all of it, right? We see the decisions that we look at and go, geez, I wouldn't make that decision again. And we see the good parts as well. But there's one part in the book you talk around forgiveness, right? Like, and that's part of what we're talking about here, of how do we go about forgiving ourselves for the decisions that we made, that we look back on now and say, I would have done that differently. And it's impacted me in a negative way as a result.
It's the hardest and simplest thing to do in the world, right? Because it's as simple as, I forgive myself. And it's as hard as, and this is the critic, but you don't deserve to forgive yourself. You deserve the shame. You deserve the guilt. And there's a lot of societal conditioning. You talk about layers. There's a lot of societal conditioning that keeps that loop in place. And there's a lot of evolution that keeps that in place, because the idea of guilt or shame is that it's a reminder not to do something that made you feel bad in the first place. So it's a positive tool. It's a psychological tool that has developed to keep us from putting ourselves in bad situations. Again, but that's all it is. It's a full stop there. It's not something we need to live in, right? It's not, you watch porn and then you go lay down beside your wife at night or your girlfriend, and you feel that pang, maybe, assuming that's your relationship with porn and your wife. And that guilt's like, yeah, you shouldn't have done it. Right. And then the next time you got an itch to scratch, that guilt's going to come up. And it's just a reminder tool.
Okay. If it's a reminder tool, how do we go about not feeling bad, but also continuing to raise our standards in whatever area it is. Like, because if the guilt is there, if the shame is there, if those pieces are there to remind us not to do something because it's out of alignment, say, with who it is that we're aiming to become, what do we replace that with?
Well, the first thing is change your relationship with bad, right? You don't have to feel bad about feeling bad. Feeling bad is an emotion. Feeling bad is, we live in, again, a world where feeling bad got a bad reputation, for a terrible, bland words there. And that's part of the problem. It's part of the guilt cycle. We don't have to feel bad for feeling bad. And that's where forgiveness allows us as a tool to release all that. You talked about this idea of some simple concept and then unpacking the layers of it forever and ever and ever. This is the problem with self-improvement. This is the problem with that whole culture of which I am very much, a believer in. But at the same time, it traps us in a cycle that does not allow us to let go, because it says to us, I still need to improve. I am not enough as I am. And we are enough from the moment that we are born until our time ends on this earth. At every single moment of that, we are enough. That doesn't mean we can't strive for more or better or want things, but the bedrock is from a place of enoughness. And we already have that. It's a gift of being a human. And if we've murdered somebody, this is, in the chapter in the book on forgiveness, who do you think has the hardest journey back to forgive themselves other than someone who took somebody's life? Yet there are people who found peace, and there are bystanders and who will gladly watch that person get the electric chair one day. But you said it, we have to live with ourselves. That's the person we spend the most time with. And even the murderer can find peace in knowing that it was a scared, sad, abused person, whoever it was, that made that horrendous choice. And that horrendous choice, which took the life of someone and ruined the lives of many others, does not mean that person is no longer enough and worthy of forgiveness. Because we all, on the spectrum, deserve and crave forgiveness. And the first person and the best person and the only person who can really give that to us is ourselves. Because it doesn't matter what your priest says or what your buddy says, you still have to forgive yourself. And it's all the little moments. If you forgive yourself for the day that you didn't do your workout or whatever, right? It frees you from the guilt of that the next day. And the guilt is the poison that makes you not do the workout the next day, or eat the tub of ice cream and not do the workout the next day. As a crude example, so it comes down to that very simple thing of being able to let go and forgive. And that simple thing is the hardest thing it seems humans have to deal with, right? It is the great contradiction of our consciousness.
There's a line that you shared. You don't have to feel bad for feeling bad. That's a profound insight right there, because that's our conditioning, right, of what bad is. At the end of the day, as you mentioned, feeling bad, whether that's guilty or shame or whatever the thing is, it's an emotion that we're experiencing. And it's something that, in some examples shared, it's an example of not being who I wanted to be. And as a result, I carry with me these feelings. And if we can not feel bad for feeling bad, the emotion can still be there. This is how I'm understanding it. The emotion can still be there of the negative feeling, the negative emotion. But if we can reshape rearrange our relationship with that feeling to being simply a way of understanding that this is not the direction that I'm going to go in going forward, that I'm going to choose a different path. And because this is then where responsibility comes in as well, right? Because if you forgive yourself and then you don't take responsibility for how you show up the next time around, then we're destined to repeat patterns over and over and over again. And I would say it's an easy way out of, oh, I don't have to feel bad about feeling bad anymore. Oh, I can just go and do whatever I want and hurt whoever I want and be basically an asshole, to the people around me, and there's no repercussions there. That's definitely not what we're talking about here. There is an ability to be able to almost make peace with those emotions and see them for what they are, utilizing them as ways to be able to determine whether you're on track, off track, and make better, more conscious, more strategic decisions going forward that would line up with who it is that you're aiming to become. Would that be appropriate with what I just shared there, with what you were saying?
There's a difference between forgiveness and denial. And I think you hit it on the head where you said there's a responsibility. Absolutely. Forgiveness has a responsibility attached to it. And it's not about just allowing it as a scapegoat for bad behavior. And it doesn't make yourself feel good. Right. And there's a psychopathy to the extreme ends of this spectrum, right? A sociopath or a psychopath or a narcissist who is not going to see their self in the situation. Forgiveness is seeing where you erred and having a deep desire to do better, but knowing that the path to doing better starts at forgiveness. It doesn't start at the result of doing better, because if you do better, but you just carry the guilt and you carry the shame and you haven't forgiven yourself, you're still in a pattern, a negative pattern. You're in a prison cell of your own making, right? And so I think you're bang on by saying that responsibility and forgiveness go hand in hand. And we have to take it with us all the way to the grave. You talk about arrival fallacy, right? You talked about arriving. We're never going to be there, ever. There's no there, right? At least in this life. And the idea of playing the piano, which was a beautiful example you used, is a perfect analogy or metaphor for it's not about having played the perfect piece. It's about the experience of getting to play the piano every single day. That is what life is, getting to live life every single day in the freedom of the living of it or the doing of it, not trying to end up somewhere, because there isn't that somewhere.
How did you go about when, like in your earlier years, because you were an elite athlete for a period of time, and like that, there was an injury that occurred. I want you to share a little about that story. What happens when there's certain notes, if we use the music as a continued analogy there, when certain notes you're simply unable to play anymore? How do you pivot to play a different song, if you will, to be able to make your way through that when you really wanted to go down this road, but all of a sudden you're faced with the reality that it's no longer a possibility? Like what happened for you when you were going through that, and what was the injury?
Well, that's a very interesting part of my life, because I had been an elite runner. I'd represented Canada internationally. I had a full ride scholarship, and I ended up rupturing my Achilles. And my trajectory towards what I thought was the London 2012 Olympics was very much in jeopardy. To the point where it was actually my mind that cracked and made me decide I needed to quit the sport, that I would never get back to the level I was at. And that was a real possibility, but I definitely spun a yarn in my own head that was a foregone conclusion, in which maybe it wasn't. But the problem is again, of course, as a runner, you're obsessed with times. You're obsessed with personal best. The whole nature of the sport is like, can I get 1 second faster every rep, every day, every month, whatever? Like, you're so motivated by that feedback loop, and that's fine. The problem was I had put everything in that bucket in the sport. All of it had become about the glory, the winning, the times. And years later, when I came back to running, I never ran with a watch again. And I enjoyed running so much. The freedom of it, the feeling of being so in tune with your body and in tune with the ground that you're running over, and the power and this idea that my body can move this quickly. And it's not about how fast I'm moving. I realized because I was running slower than I used to run, but the feeling of fastness was still the same, regardless of what the split read. And I realized then that if I'd chosen to keep running, I would have found so much more enjoyment and meaning in the sport by just focusing on the love of doing it. Like, you look at the Olympics and it's like one guy gets to win the 1500 meter every 4 years. And there's so many variables that come into play as to whether or not that happens. And if you predicated all your happiness and your worth of doing this sport on one race that has a million variables, well, there's no point in doing the sport, because there's 1,000 incredible athletes on top of 100,000 decent athletes that are not going to win that race every 4 years. So should they just not show up? And so, my North Star was not in the right place. I repurposed my life, and I took my energy into other areas that felt just as fulfilling, and that can happen in life. Any decision can change the trajectory of our life, and we can always have a decision. And that can, as I said earlier, every day we're born again, and so every day, we may have made a decision, and we may wish to course correct that decision. We're not bound by it, but they all can be beautiful, life-changing decisions, or just little things that we're just constantly readjusting. And so, in the end, it was fine. But I certainly, if there's some sort of split parallel universe that exists in a sort of interstellar kind of way, I wish for that version of myself that he's happy running and finally realize the joy in still competing. Because again, like, every level, even if your function and your peak performance goes down, that doesn't mean that the experience changes. It's for the love of the sport.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's the love of it. I'm a big believer in measuring for success, right? And different metrics and stuff like that. Absolutely. And I wonder, do we get to a point as a species where things are so tracked, so measured in different areas, where in some ways, some areas, like, it doesn't matter. Now, if you're going for the Olympics, somebody's going for the Olympics, listening to this, it's maybe a completely different story there. Still finding love in what you do. And there's beauty being away from the numbers and the technology. And like you said, just simply being able to feel the ground beneath your feet in that way. And that's one thing that I took from what you were sharing there, is as we continue to advance, as the technology continues to advance and it continues to be massively a part of our lives. I know for me personally, if I'm always having to be on, it's a recipe for me feeling burnt out. And it's just a matter of time before that occurs. There's something really nice about not having to be somewhere or to measure exactly what's going on. And I love having, and I definitely need to be doing better at this, I love having tech-free days and just being able to wake up and go, all right, what do I feel like doing? What do we feel like doing? And there's something really beautiful about that. I don't know, I think prioritizing some of those pieces, especially in the areas of our lives that actually really do bring us joy. Yes, I perform with the piano and guitar on stage during the keynotes I deliver. And I'd say probably my favorite thing when it comes to piano especially is just sitting with the lights off.
Yeah.
And playing whatever flows through. And there's something really just beautiful about that, of not needing to be anywhere, just being in this moment and being present and not having to have anything else figured out,
Yeah, no, brother, I know. I think it is the tragedy of our society that we track everything and that it's all become a performance metric. I don't track anything anymore. I don't track social. I don't have likes turned on. I understand, you have to measure certain results to make improvements. I understand that. And there's something very real about that. But at the end of the day, if you're doing what you love, it will be or it won't be to whatever degree. The Lex Friedman podcast, he doesn't track anything. And I'm sure there's plenty of really good podcasts that track everything. They both end up where they're going to end up. And it's not a question of where they ended up. It's a question of, are they enjoying what they did, or what they do? I'll just share a little, on the piano. My dad is a lifelong professional musician, who, by his standards, would not have made it to the stage that he wanted to make it to yet. I still believe he will. And I remember as a kid, I'd hear him at night playing the piano, and I would sneak out of my bedroom and I just listened to him play the piano. And it's like, as bad as he wants the success, which I know eats at him every single day, like it does every single person who wants to get to that next level, he still loves this. Because nobody's listening. He doesn't know I'm listening. Nobody's listening right now. And he'll always have that, right? He'll always have that. And it's the same as, what you said. And so that's where the magic of life is. It's not, he made a comment the other day about the decline of Coldplay's music, from like Rush of Blood to like where it is today. And he's like, I don't like, there's a studio forcing them to produce music. Like, they shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like, why? They love playing music. Who cares if their album isn't as good as, if they have every right to continue making music, whether or not we think it's as good as their initial work. And he's like, oh yeah, it's just funny, right? Like, the metric of success for their music was based off of not, their right to do it was based off, it had to be a certain way. It had to be the seminal, fantastic work that they did early days, right? No, and that's measuring. It's a different form of tracking, right? He retracted that comment after we spoke. I think he just wants to hear more Rush of Blood to the Head because it was so good.
This is it's a really good part of the conversation here, and just really driving this home that whether you track or whether you don't track isn't the point necessarily here. It's the underlying component of, are you enjoying doing it? Are you having a good time going through the process? And that good time can be the challenges of solving a problem. You decide and you determine what that good time is, what that good flow is. And each of us track it different way. I mean, I have an Oura ring, for example. I track that. And that's one of the key pieces is honestly just making sure that I get to bed on time. Right. So making sure that I know that if I'm not in bed super early, I'm still waking up at the same time, basically. And it just means that I've had an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours less of sleep. When I wake up, I'm up and I'm ready to go, whether it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And if I'm not getting to bed early enough, then I'm not getting enough sleep. And that for me, it does work really well when it comes to tracking that. And each person's going to be different. There's different things that I do. I love to track. Every year I theme my years, and it's something I recommend everybody do. And this year is the year of amplification for me. On my wall is these key pieces of what does an amplified life look like. And they include prioritizing wellness, fulfilling on my purpose, creating a beautiful life with Brittany, and another one of building meaningful relationships. There's 4 examples there. There are things that I can look back on to see, okay, did I fulfill on those? But they're much bigger picture than very, very specific metrics. It's more of a feeling in that way of, Brittany and I constantly talk about, one, just how incredibly lucky we are to have found each other in this world of billions and billions of people. How much love that we have for one another, and the life that we're creating. We're not keeping track of how many notes we leave for one another, or the moments that we say I love you, or anything like that. It's simply the beautiful joy of being that person for that other person and with that other person and creating with that. As I go through the different aspects of what I continue to focus on when it comes to the growth of the company, one of those metrics is absolutely like, how am I feeling?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's a feeling, and the metrics can lead to that feeling in a way, but at the end of the day, it's a feeling. And I don't think I've got anything else to say about that aside from ensuring that you're doing things because it's aligned with where it is that you're aiming to go.
Yeah.
And for the right reasons, because we can get so far off track when we are caring too much about what others think we should be or where we should be. In the book, you've mentioned about the needing approval or looking for approval from others, whether it's from parents or society. Like, how have you worked through that to maybe not care too much about what other people think? Or is it still a journey that you're going on, and how are you going about that?
I've started to think that there might be a fucks bucket where if you've given so many of them, eventually it starts to run out over time. And I might be reaching that point. I don't want the idea that, like, I do care what people think, and I think that there's value in caring what people think, because one of the components of that is, well, how did you show up for that person, right? And also being aware of how they might feel about a situation. It's just when it becomes a chain around your neck or something that guides your life to the point of it affecting you and how you show up, because you're so focused out. That's a real problem. Like, what is my driving force here? Am I doing this for me, or am I doing this for somebody else? And so it's an ongoing battle. I mean, a journey maybe. I was always told I was a good boy. That's sort of where the book starts off, and I was never allowed to explore the treacherous sides of myself or the naughty sides of myself. And there's actually a natural process in life where we're supposed to do that. We kind of tolerate it with 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds, and even then we don't really tolerate it. We force them into they need to be behaved, they need to be good, but really, of course, they need to have structure. But we also allow them to understand all sides of themselves, and to allow them to push past the boundaries of what we set so that they can see what's on the other side of that. And it's very hard because in we have a structure where, first it's the parents and then it's the teachers, and everybody's just putting guardrails on you your whole life. And those guardrails are very binary. They're very good and bad a lot of the time, right? We aren't allowed that freedom of nuance. And this is what play is for. This is what exploration is for. This is what not being afraid to destroy something to see if you can try and put it together is about. This is what your late teens and your early 20s about getting out there and getting into a bit of trouble is about. It's about allowing yourself to explore the edges of yourself, right? And while we don't always know we never make it quite to the edge, because there's always this sort of instinctual part that pulls us back. And I think it's Hunter S. Thompson that says anybody who's actually gone to the edge, we don't know, because they fell off the other side. So, but there's a skill, and I don't want to use the word discipline. Maybe you can come up with a better word than discipline from this, but let's use alcohol, for example. Sometimes alcohol is not healthy. So let's start there. Let's make sure that's on the table. But sometimes people don't drink alcohol because they're afraid of losing their inhibitions. They're afraid of who they are when they let their guard down. And so they control themselves by saying, I'm never going to drink. When you go into a medicine journey, like with psilocybin or ayahuasca or DMT or something like that, there's a launching phase where your ego is desperately clinging to and holding on to what it deems as, reality and itself. And the medicine in that moment wants to take you out of that. so that you can see all things and all sides of yourself and really begin to heal. And so we're just wired to not let go. And this goes into all of our programming as people, where the idea of pushing our boundaries is sort of beaten out of us, is scolded out of us, is ruled out of us. And we just never get to explore those aspects of ourselves. And I remember when I was a kid and I was in this swamp that was around the corner from my house, and I would explore the swamp bit by bit. And as my courage grew, I'd explore a bit more. And there was this one final area of the swamp where there was a tunnel. So it was like, it was a flood. It was a drainage for, flood and waters that came out of different aspects of the neighborhood. And they would fill this pool, but this pool looked like a jungle. And then on the end of this pool, there was a tunnel, and the tunnel, from what I could tell, went underneath the road and ended and went into the forest on the other side. And after a year of exploring the swamp and finally getting the courage to, I built this raft, and I went from the shore and I crossed this little pool, and I'm at the edge of this tunnel, and it's dark, and everything in my body's like, that's dangerous. Your mom would not want you to do this. You're going to get in trouble. Don't go through this tunnel. But everything on the other side of me was like, no, I want to know what's on the other side. That's what life is about. Giving ourselves permission to pass through that dark tunnel that everybody else is telling us not to, so that we can know what's on the other side, but more importantly, so that we can become the person courageous enough and free enough to take those steps. Because every single day we're faced with some version of that story in our real life, whether it's a conversation we need to have with our wife, whether it's a step we want to take in our professional career, whether it's about our personal health. We have to have the courage to see what's on the other side of that. But what's on the other side of that's unfamiliar, and what's unfamiliar is unsafe, and it's bad. And as soon as we unwire that and we learn that we have the capacity, and yes, there's risk, and yes, there might be something bad that happens, but we have the capacity to cross that threshold. The amount of life that opens up to us is limitless. There's nothing that's no longer possible because of that courage. And that's how I've tried to live my life, is to try and, when those walls come up in my brain, is to understand, well, why are they there? And how do I get past this so that I can see what's on the other side?
You've got a few of those areas now that you're working on. The few projects you've got, Naked Revival. There's a movie, the documentary as well. Like these different projects that, I mean, you're coming up right now against the unknown, as I understand it anyway. That there's these different pieces of, okay, where's this going to go and how successful is this going to be? And we're all going through this in different ways, shapes and forms in our own lives, both personally and professionally. So I guess, how are you navigating the tunnel now?
So my friend, I just recently started crafting a blog that explores the idea that hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever will. And it's predicated on advice that one of my business partners and also friends and mentors said, which is just say yes. Just learn to say yes. And until saying yes doesn't make sense anymore. And so even then it was a practice, because I had conflicting interests that were about to kind of collide in being away for filming a new TV show while having the launch of a brand that was about to list onto the Toronto Stock Exchange, and knowing that there was going to be some collateral damage, but deciding that I wasn't going to allow the potential collateral damage to stop me jumping in, because I loved everything that I was doing and I wanted to see if I could do it. And until it didn't work anymore, I was just going to lean in. And that's the guiding wisdom that I take, is I'm going to lean in, and I'm willing to take a few punches, and I'm willing to have a few tough conversations, and I'm willing for some balls to drop. because I believe in all that I'm doing. And I'm so excited about it that I'm not going to stop until it doesn't make sense.
When won't it make sense then? Like if someone's listening to this and go, yeah, I've got these balls that are dropping left, right, and center, right? You know, I'm trying to juggle everything and it's going on. And at what stage then do you make a decision to put some boundaries in place to remove certain pieces, to say no to certain pieces? Or, yeah, I mean, how do you think about that? Is there going to come a time where you do say goodbye to something, or is it about systemizing something to a point where you're not having to dedicate as much time to that? Like, what's your thinking around that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I like to think of Elon Musk and Doge and Tesla's falling stock price. and then the decision to be like, I'm done with Doge, and I gotta focus on Tesla. And by Tesla, I mean the other 5 multi-billion-dollar projects he has going on. But that was a moment, right? And so he had a spat with President Trump, and it sort of led to a forced decision. I think we just know, because one, you mentioned it before, like, how do I feel? Am I happy? And it's not like, did I have a hard day because I had a lot on my plate? Of course you're gonna have hard days. Maybe they're all hard days, but am I happy doing all these things? And am I doing them well? And how do I block and tackle my projects so that I can continue to do them well? Because one of the things that the same business partner friend said to me was, well, I guarantee you Jeff Bezos has more on his plate than you do. So how does he do it? Figure out the way that he does it before you make a decision. Find the solution. And maybe the solution is I got to walk away from one of these things, right? And it's like, well, I'm not happy. I'm losing money on that thing. It's destroying my marriage. And but his view is always, we'll try and find the solution in favor of keeping it. And if that doesn't work, then begin to exit different things and restructure that way. And maybe I'll run out of energy. It's possible too.
Well, there's a great project one of the projects that you are working on, which is, it sounds an incredible use of your time, of Naked Revival. Talk to us about the purpose behind that, where it came from, and to give a bit of backstory as well as to what Naked was originally, and why this, why now, and let's start there.
Yeah. Well, Naked was a startup I had going back to 2008, and I had been coming out of my time as a runner with the injury, and I was traveling the world, and I discovered underwear, and I realized that underwear didn't need to be crappy, because I was in Peru and I discovered this gorgeous Pima cotton underwear. I was just blown away by how it felt, and so I was like, wow, I can make really nice underwear, and I can make it more technical than this because I'm used to running fabrics, and so I was all in on men's underwear. Definitely didn't see that coming in my life. And that company ran the full course of a startup to sale. Like we started it. It was out of a kitchen, and eventually listed on the NASDAQ. And from the NASDAQ, it divested to a company out of Australia. So it really ran the full life cycle over a decade, and I got to live it all. And I took 5 years off, made some films, and did a few TV shows, and I was getting called back to do the underwear. But what I saw was missing was this guy. He was evolving. He didn't just want nice underwear now. He wanted to live better. He wanted better health. He wanted to feel better in his body. He wanted to have better skin. And there was all these things that I was interested in. And I said, well, what if I gave him a vehicle that made that easier for him, where it wasn't just about the underwear, it's what the underwear represented as a lifestyle, right? It's like, well, if I put on nice underwear, it's like your soccer kit. It's like you have your game day kit for your soccer match, or in your case, your pickleball match. And it's like, it's all of it in one. that takes me to this place I want to go and to be this person I want to be. And so Naked Revival became about the routines and rituals that help a guy elevate his life and become the best person he wants to be, all in one place, from your cold plunges to your skincare, to your underwear, to your supplements. And it was everything that I loved and everything that I did and everything that I believed in, all in one place. And so it was a really fun thing to do, to be, so close to all your passions and creating something that by its very nature can help people in the most personal way. And so it's been a bit of a journey to get it going, but we finally launched, not unexpectedly. There's a lot of moving pieces in a business like that, right? So we've launched now, we're live, and there's product available. We have our incredible underwear available, loungewear, red lights are launching, cold plunges and saunas are launching here shortly, but the full vision of the brand is set to kick off in early next year.
It's super exciting for that. How then, okay, so you mentioned about elevating, and in this case, the target is men specifically, correct?
For now. It's intended to be both, but
for now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, let's go a little more broadly then. So this is for men and women then. What would you say? So you mentioned about elevating them to become the very, I think the best version of themselves or something along those lines. Let's maybe distill this down into, say, a few key action items that people could walk away with. How does someone become the best version of themselves? How do they prioritize, coming full circle from what we started with, prioritize wellness when life gets busy? Like, how do you go about that? What are some key steps now that somebody can take? They say, you know what, I'm hearing this. I know I want to become the best version of myself. I know I want to pursue this. I know I want to look after myself. I know I want to be that version. What do we have to do?
Yeah. Brick by brick, right? You have to build it brick by brick. And that's the only way we can do anything, right? If you're writing a book, you write it one word, one sentence, one page at a time. And it's the same thing with elevation. In your life, you build it one piece at a time. So maybe you start with, I'm going to set aside 20 minutes every single day to work out and 20 minutes every single day to meditate. So I just doubled up from my initial advice at the beginning, which was pick one non-negotiable. But let's say you set out an hour and you picked a couple of things to put in that hour, right? That's how you start. And you do that every single day as a non-negotiable. You can put it in your calendar. You schedule your meetings around that. But I have found that sometimes that's not enough. Just the fact that it's on a piece of paper in your digital calendar isn't enough. It is about honoring that thing which you have set aside every single day. And then from that, you begin to get wins. You feel better. And that's where you get to build on this thing. And when I put it into the framework, as we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, of like, what does it look like if I'm a professional doing it? And how does every single one of these things enhance my singular goal? Your goal was amplification. You talked about it a number of times on the podcast. How does the fitness, the skincare, the supplements, the ice bath, the sauna, the whatever it is, the meditation, amplify the thing that I'm trying to be good at? If you need to use the word justify, that's how you justify it. Because you've now given yourself a productive and practical reason to do these things, because it's going to fuel your career, your relationship, all these different things. Because if you are healthier, you're going to have better sex. If you're healthier, you're going to be able to go harder at work. If you are, if you feel better, you're going to be happier with your kids. You're going to show up less reactionary to your colleagues, right? So you start to see how the ecosystem of taking care of yourself fuels personal and professional growth simultaneously together. Then it all makes sense as part of your day. It's no different than needing to check your emails. It's no different than needing to get on the team call. It's part of it. And then when that happens, and people see the effects of it, they start to allow it to happen. Just like when somebody says, oh, he's an athlete, he's got to train. They don't judge him for being in the gym for 4 hours because he's an athlete. Well, when they start to see that you're kicking ass, whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it, right? And that's how it snowballs into, this is, now I get to live my life this way.
One, from an action standpoint, there's a few pieces in there to make sure that people cover, right? We've got a non-negotiable, like get it into your calendar or somewhere where you can actually see it, for one. Like make it easier to remember to actually go forward and do it. But at the end of the day, if there's not a reason big enough for you to actually make that commitment, whether it is your own health and well-being, whether it's performing better at work, whether it's better in your relationship, whatever it is, then the standard isn't going to be there. And so I guess with that, let's maybe go through we have a rapid fire section and segment here. It's called Your Edge. So I want to know, what's your number one value and why, first up?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is a value. I think it's a value. I think it's really important to look at people as people outside of our own ego, so that we can be compassionate. And maybe therein lies the value, is compassion, because when we show up with compassion, and this is towards ourselves as well, right? We create so much more ease, and we have our relationships deepen. They become easier to have. We can be more productive with people when we show up with compassion, as opposed to our own ego, our own fears, that create resistance to flow. So compassion is a big value of mine.
What about on the belief side of things? What's a core belief that you have that's really shaped who you've become, whether that being the belief about yourself, about your well-being, about others, about the world? What's something that's really stuck home true there?
Well, it's kind of the opposite, is not believing my own bullshit, is the belief, right? To always flip the narrative and check the biases of which myself or somebody else might be coming at something is critical, I think, to not get stuck.
Has that shown up in some different ways recently?
Yeah, I mean, it shows up every single day, right? It's like we live with our beliefs. They guide everything that we do, right? It's like, is this true? Can I be absolutely sure it's true? Is an old coaching framework, right? And so I'll just use an example in reference to jumping into a bunch of things, a bunch of different projects. It's like, I can't do this. Well, how do you know you can't do it? Well, is it true? Like, how can you be absolutely sure you haven't done it? So, oh, you're right. I haven't tried to do it. So, no, I think my gut is telling me I can't do it, but that's just a belief, because who knows? Maybe I level up in this process, right? I turn super mode. And so it's very simple. They happen all the time in our relationships too, right? Like, I believe my wife is X, fill in the blank, whatever. Believe my husband is X, fill in the blank. It's like, well, can I be sure they're aloof, or is that just how I'm perceiving it? Or have I not communicated with them, or have I not provided a container in which they feel safe to speak freely with me? Like, again, it shows up everywhere. My kid is again, fill in the blank. Wait, is my kid that way? Or am I just projecting my own shit onto my kid because I don't like my job? Right? Like, it's everywhere.
Yeah. Assumption can be a very dangerous thing. Assumption can be a very dangerous thing. And challenging those assumptions. There's this song I wrote years ago, had the lyrics in it: take me as I am, see I'm a walking contradiction. Yeah. What I thought was absolute couldn't be much further from the truth. And it's just this notion that I'll believe what I believe until either proven otherwise, or until I challenge myself and realize that it's actually not true. It's not accurate. And the more that we can challenge ourselves, the more we can move into a greater version of ourselves. So the last question with that is, what's a habit, ritual, or routine that you simply can't live without?
So on a day-to-day basis, it's sweat once a day. You'd probably guess that based on the last couple hours. But on a yearly basis, I do what's called a massage. It's a Japanese word. I think it translates more directly to like this ice shower, but it's been Americanified, if you will. And it's just been turned into like an all-day physical challenge that is not something that's inside your normal routine. So I'll give you an example. Like if you've never paddleboarded in your life, but you're fit, your Misogi's like, I'm going to paddle board for 8 hours or 12 hours or 14 hours today. It's like if you train for a marathon, your Misogi's not a marathon, right? It's putting yourself in a situation that is physically and mentally challenging, but also somewhat unknown. And this isn't about posting. You don't get to post your Misogi's. That's one of the rules. And you just push yourself to the limit, and it opens up. Again, when you achieve it, you're like, anything's possible. I just paddleboarded all day, and I've never paddleboarded in my damn life, right? It's about wrestling with that struggle.
So you've done this previously, and you do it each year?
I do it each year, yeah.
What was the last one, and what do you plan on doing next up?
Well, the last one was I flipped a tire up a mountain. Hadn't flipped a tire up a mountain before. I mean, that one was probably a little too close to home. I have flipped tires before, but I certainly don't train to flip tires up a mountain, right? So I drove to the base of a mountain with a logging road, threw the tire out the back, flipped it up the mountain.
What's coming up then? What are you going to do next?
Well, I'm wrestling with swimming because I hate swimming and I suck at swimming. And I'm wrestling with this idea of like I need to do a long endurance swim, and I'm terrified to do it. So, does it end up there or something else? And I'm thinking of doing it in the dry suit in the cold lake, the glacier-fed lake behind my house. So we're working up that the courage to either do that or I have a few other ideas, but one was like I don't run the same way I used to run. I haven't run in years, and I've never run a marathon. Sorry, I haven't run long in years. And so without specifically training for it, I ran from one town to the next town. And I'd always wanted to do that. So it was almost like a bucket list thing, because there was this famous trail. And it's like 50, 60 kilometers. And I've never run, anywhere near that. So it was cool.
Well, I look forward to hearing what you end up deciding on for this time around. Great conversation today. Where can people find out more about you? Where should they go?
Yeah, you can check out Joel. I think Joel.Primus on YouTube or Joel.Primus on Instagram, and that'll kind of point you in the direction of Substack or the website or anything like that. But definitely check out nakedrevival.com. There is lots of good stuff on there. I think it'll be an inspiring place to visit, and you'll want to join the movement.
Great. Well, appreciate the conversation. Good to see you, my man. And we will have everything that was mentioned in the show notes. We'll link to Naked Revival and those other pieces as well in the show notes at CameronAtlas.com/podcast. Great to see you, my man.
You too, brother. Talk soon.
Yeah, always good. And hey, we've got some great new guests coming up, so make sure you hit that follow button and leave a comment. And until next time, go write the next line in your story. It could be a giant leap, but it could also be a moment of clarity, a bold decision, or a daily act of discipline that takes you beyond what's comfortable. That's how we unlock your edge. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on The Edge of Possible.